Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about what I believe is the single greatest contributor to frustrations for doctors who are building wealth. And that's what we call compressed earning years.
The more assets and income you have, the more of the tax code you have access to. This is why when people say the wealthy are getting wealthier, yeah, because they get access to more of the tax code, meaning that they have more opportunities to reduce their tax liability to take that extra cash flow to put it back into your business or into your life.
Part of the conversation when we have that cash flow recovery is like, what do you need to live the lifestyle that you desire? We're not here to say you should not enjoy the fruits of the work that you have put in. And it's just, Bob likes to say income is taxable, but cash flow is plannable.
I'm excited to dive into this. And Doc, if you're listening to this, you may not know the term, but you certainly will feel the impact of it. Because here's what really happens. When you graduate from college and all of your non-doctor buddies graduate too, they all go get their offers to their big corporate jobs and everyone's all proud and they're wearing their suit and tie. And what did you do? You continued your education. While they were pouring into their 401k, you were taking out student loans and continuing to pay for investment in yourself. While they were accelerating through the corporate ladder, what were you doing? You were focusing on your specialty. You continued to pour into yourself. They continued to build investments and buy real estate. And then by the time you're in residency, putting in 100 hours a week, they're now graduating to their C-level positions and earning big incomes. And what are they doing? They're buying fancy cars. Their spouses in them are going on big vacations. They're having kids. They're doing all the stuff that, your non-doctor friends do. And so what ends up happening is you're just starting out in your career with your big earning years, with your true income potential. So you have this delay between when your friends started who graduated college with you and when you started earning those, big dollars. And that might be in your mid 30s. And depending on what your specialty was, it can even be in your late 30s. And all of a sudden now you've got a big paycheck. Exciting. Everyone's excited, but you've got a lot of student debt. You're paying things back. And all of a sudden you look around you and your spouse is like, hey, I thought I won the lottery. I thought I had a doctor as a spouse. And so their expectations are increased as well. And so you have this like delayed start to that wealth building. And then even though you had the best intentions when you started as a doctor and you're like, I'm going to do this till I die. I just want to serve people. I just want to make them well. And you find out that, man, doctoring's hard. Like this is a tough business. As a matter of fact, Bob and I did an entire series talking about physician burnout. And Bob, I can't remember the exact stat, but it was something like around 80% of doctors would self-diagnose as clinically depressed. And so you recognize, I can't do this for as long as I thought I was going to do this. And so you have this compressed time now on the back end. You started a little bit later than your buddies, and you're going to have to finish earlier because you just can't keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And this exposes you to some of the most risky investments that you can imagine in the industry. They call them dumb doctor deals because they know that you have this compressed earning, capacity. And so you've got to take these risky ventures, and oftentimes you get taken advantage of. And so it can be really frustrating. We understand that frustration. But on today's episode, I really want to dive in. Okay, cool, Joe. Thanks for sharing that. Hashtag duh.
Like depressing. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Joe. Let me go operate on somebody. No, what we want to share in this episode is great. You've got compressed earning years. What the heck do I do about it? Because the truth is we can also collapse what it takes to build generational wealth by being really intentional. So yeah, you've got compressed earning years, but we've got strategies to collapse that time frame to actually build generational wealth. So let's dive into it. Aaron, I know that you're going to have a ton of questions today. Bob, you've dealt with this for your whole career. So what do you see when it comes to compressed earning years for doctors?
Yeah, it's I think one of those things that's the elephant in the room, and some acknowledge it and some don't. And I wrote a book called Economic Termites. We'll put in the description that you can purchase it. And in Economic Termites, we talk about the 4 termites, the 4 things that eat away at our wealth, right? They're kind of the silent things. So termites, we know when we have a termite problem, damage has already been done, right? So in that book, we talk about taxes, duh, inflation, which we're experiencing at the time of this recording since the last 3 years or so, and we all know we're being lied to how inflation's improving, but that's okay. That's one of the topics. Time as a termite, and then laws and regulations, meaning our politicians. So today we're going to talk about time, the compressed years. And a lot of people, when we start having conversations, they feel bad that they made bad decisions, or I should have started earlier. I could have, I would have. But you didn't, because exactly what Joe said. You were investing in yourself to be able to serve to others. That's a ministry. It's a ministry. And to care for us as patients. And so when we look at this from a planning perspective, we got to look at a plan for the planning and lay out to you what you just said, Joe. What's the most efficient and effective way to buy back that time into our planning? Okay. And when I say buy back, I'm not talking about the cost of buying goods and services, but I'm talking about the effectiveness and the efficiency of a plan to buy some of those years back from the front end and be able to front load some of those like end of years based on the effective and efficiency of our plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think, one of the strategies that I would encourage doctors to think about is do not collapse to the pressure of the multi-trillion-dollar industry of advertising. So we get it. You graduate from school, all of a sudden, and Bob, you talked with me about this. I experienced this when I was selling real estate. I had a few doctor clients, and one of them had they hadn't even landed their new position yet, but they had finished their residency. And the loan company is like, we don't care. Give them they had access to it because they knew exactly what his income was going to be. It was going to go from like 30 something $1,000 a year. This is a while ago, but 30,000 a year to, I think his minimum was going to be around 150. So they're like, yep, he qualifies at 150. It's like the industry sees you and your profession, doctor, as like, oh, you've got this earning potential. Credit is easily available to you, even though you have massive student debt. And so what I see a lot of doctors fall prey to is they look around at all their doctor friends. They look at all their friends that they graduated, part of their fraternity that they're a part of, and they see the cars they're driving, they see the houses they live in, and they instantly want to have that, and they have the capacity to do that. Mm-hmm. And my encouragement to you is just wait a little bit. Mm-hmm. Delay that lifestyle increase as long as you can, because you have and if you're listening to this and you're a newer doctor, trust me, you're going to hit these phases of burnout that are going to change your perspective on everything. And that's a lot of what I get to do in Terra Firma, is the mindset coaching aspect of what we do, really helping these doctors get, I call it the 5 10s. How do you live a 10 out of 10 lifestyle across all the aspects of life: spiritual, family, business, financial, fitness? And so if you're going to delay that increased expense on a lifestyle standpoint, you can then collapse those investment years. And so that would be my first encouragement, is just because you can doesn't mean you should increase your lifestyle expense. Mm-hmm. As much as you can, delay that, from happening.
Can I help with maybe a little explanation or an example of why? Because I think what some people may be feeling when you say that, Joe, is I have done that for 10 years already. I've got all this student debt, right? I want to reward myself for doing what I've done, which is an amazing accomplishment, right? To become a doctor and go through residency and now get into practice and whatever that means to you as a physician. And now this guy is telling me to wait a couple more years. This is crazy. And it's not. And let me explain why. It goes back to those economic termites: taxes, inflation, time, and laws and regulations. Okay, let's talk about the first one with taxes specifically. Okay, to Joe's point, you're going to go from a certain type of income to now you're in practice and you're going to have this extra earning potential. right? And it's the greatest you're ever going to have. And what's going to happen is the way the rules are designed, based on the government laws and taxes, is for us to pay taxes. We're taxpayers. That's how the government sees us. They call us taxpayers. Every once in a while, they'll call us citizens, but it's kind of a bad word to the government. But we're taxpayers. We generate revenue for the government. Okay. So when we look at that, and let's say you buy a very simple house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and let's say it's $350. Okay. I know if you're in California or some of these other metropolitan areas, you're like, well, that's a car. That's not a house, right? What can I get for $350? I get it, but this is just an example. Okay. So you buy it for $350, and let's say your mortgage payment's $2,000 a month. Okay. That's after tax. So what has to happen is your income has to come from your practice to your personal checking account. And when that happens, it passes through the tax man's hands. We call it the income funnel. Okay. So if you're in now a 24 to 35% tax bracket, 24 to 35% of that money is eaten away to net out $2,000 a month. Okay. That's just on a 350,000. Okay. Very nice little comfortable house. But all of a sudden you get into practice and you're like, no, let's go to that gated neighborhood. Let's go to the neighborhood our friends are in. And that 350 changes to 750. Now that 2,000 a month turns into 4,000 a month. So does your tax bill. It skyrockets. And that has to come out of your pocket. That is an expense line to you as an individual to pay to the IRS. Okay. The IRS is a home employee, and you got to pay that money out to them. So what Joe's saying is that if we're able to just delay that for a couple years, and we don't have to pay the tax man those dollars, could we in our plan shift those dollars into another asset that generates cash flow that can pay for the extra cost of that $750,000 house? And the answer is yes. Just need to diagnose that in our initial 30-day assessment and planning of what we're going to do for you in that plan, right? So those compressed years, we start buying back some of those times because we're using the tax dollars, we're using planning, we're using the tax code. Now, you may be sitting here saying, well, I don't understand this whole tax code thing, and I just feel like I'm paying more than I should. And that's right. But here's the thing. Remember, I said the game and the rules. The more assets and income you have, the more of the tax code you have access to. Okay. So this is why when people say the wealthy are getting wealthier, yeah, because they get access to more of the tax code, meaning that they have more opportunities to reduce their tax liability, to take that extra cash flow to put it back into your business or into your life in a tax efficient way, because there's other parts of the tax code you have access to, but you don't now. So you can't know what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We already see your potential. So that's why when we talk about tax planning and terraform, when we talk about the coaching like Joe brought up, is that mindset of understanding, how's this whole plan build my overall wealth and legacy for not just you, but your spouse, your kids, your future grandkids, right? Your community, your church, or the charities you want to help. Not trying to put all that pressure on you right now, but that's what we're already seeing for you. Because those are things we're already doing for our clients and our members. Right. But what's that mean to you? Right. And so I think it's very important to understand that aspect from a numbers perspective. And that's what, when Aaron talks about the cash flow recovery, that's what we're talking about, is what's that number look like? What's that number look like?
Well, and Aaron, you and I were on a call with a doctor the other day, and we were talking about some of this. He said, yes, he has a big business with lots of doctors that are inside of his business. He said, you'd be shocked at how many doctors in their 70s are still living paycheck to paycheck. Granted, they're large paychecks, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck. So to the doctor who's sitting there going, yeah, I've been waiting 10 years. Like, are you telling me I need to wait longer? What I'd have to say to you is, how's that working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be that doctor? And Bob, you said this before. I don't buy the Mercedes today so I can buy the Rolls Royce, in a decade.
Mhm.
And not that either of us are buying Rolls Royces, but I think the bottom line is, like, if you look around at your doctor friends, and especially in today's day and age with social media, all you're seeing are the highlight reels of everyone else's life.
Mhm.
You just see the vacation they go on. You see what you don't see is the argument with their spouse in bed at night. What
Mhm.
you don't see is the stress that just mounts every single day. And I would just encourage you, live differently. You don't have to follow the path that everyone else is following. When you want to, if the secret that's here for this episode is live differently so that you can build generational wealth,
Mhm.
that does not happen on accident.
Mhm.
I promise you it doesn't.
Yeah.
And part of the conversation when we have that cash flow recovery is like, what do you need to live the lifestyle that you desire? We're not here to say you should not enjoy the fruits of the work that you have put in and continue to put in. It's just, Bob likes to say income is taxable, but cash flow is plannable. And so often people, doctors, they just don't have a plan because they've never taken the time to put a plan in place. And that same doctor we were talking to was saying, these doctors, like, they're respected individuals who consider themselves, very rightfully so, very intelligent. But when it comes to finances, they're not. They don't teach that in medical school. So they're afraid to ask these questions. So they just move forward and continue to make mistakes. But it's like, when you know better, you can do better. So like, yeah, you may have made some mistakes. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So when you can create a plan that lets you live the life you want to live and still get the most from the rest of it, and not be the 70-year-old who, is still living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
It's interesting because we have been talking about typically doctors who are getting newer into practice, but what about those doctors who have been in practice, right? And honestly, that's where most of the doctors come to us. They've already been in practice. They're coming to us because they feel that tax burden. So does this work the same way for them? Of course, absolutely. It doesn't matter if you have the Mercedes or the Rolls Royce, right? It doesn't matter because in the planning process, I guess the best way to equate this is I'm originally from Southern California. Yes, you see the Texas, and I live in Texas now. Can't be a tax planner and stay in the most expensive tax state and tell people how to save money on taxes when I'm living in that state. So, but anyways, that's just a little side note. If you live in Southern California, and you've seen freight trains. They come and go. It's a different traffic than freeway traffic, but it is traffic, right? There's a lot of freight trains. And I'm an observer. I like to look at things because I like to use life in our examples as analogies, right? Like I've talked about with economic termites. Have you ever seen a freight train with the engine car in the middle of the train?
No.
Never. Makes no sense. Makes zero sense. Where is it usually at? In the front.
Or the back.
Or the back. Exactly. Right? In fact, they're designed to pull and push. That's an asset. So are your assets, the things you put your money into, whether it's real estate, retirement accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, businesses, or whatever asset that's creating income for you. Is it organized in the right way? Or are these assets in the middle of the train? They're not being efficient. They're just creating taxes for you. And your goal and desire was to build wealth, but you just feel overly burdened that you're earning more or you're paying more and more taxes, and you're not earning as much or keeping as much as you should be. That is what we do, is we look at your assets. We look at the train and say, where should these be organized based on the asset? Because the asset creates income, and the income, depending on the asset, is what the IRS taxes. So the order of your assets is important for the efficiency of how you reduce your tax liability. It could be your same assets, just reorganized in a right plan. Okay, and so a lot of doctors who come to us have been in practice, or they have a 5-year runway to exit out of doctoring. This is the process we take. Same economic termites. The time instead on the front end is now buying more time on the back end, right? And how do we go into our golden years, are no longer in practice, and not lose our tax benefits because we just got out of our practice? How do we continue getting tax benefits? That's the planning process. That's essentially what we're doing in trying to help in that process.
Mhm.
Right or wrong, but that's what we have found to be the most effective and efficient to create an outcome for the doctors that we've worked with.
Right. And I think, touching back on that, so that's another of the secrets, is the organization of your assets that determine the income that determines your tax liability. I would just encourage you, if at any stage of life doctor, sometimes what I have found is they think, if I just buy this next thing for my family, they'll love me more, because you're focused on your business. You're focused on serving your patients. And what I often say to doctors is, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And so if you find yourself empty and trying to pour, guess what? That same person shows up at home to your spouse. That same person shows up home to your kids. That same person shows up in your hobbies and your interests, whatever they might be. And I would just encourage you, like, buying the next thing so that people love you that much more is not necessarily where happiness is going to come from. Like, if we're looking for your maximum happiness factor, invest in experiences with your family, like, be intentional with what you're doing. That's where those relationships are really going to grow. So it's not just about, can I spend more money? How do I reduce that lifestyle expense bump? Focus on generating happiness or joy from different aspects than just spending money, because that's going to have a massive impact on what what we can help you with from a tax savings perspective. The higher your lifestyle expense, the less is available for us to do for you. And to Bob's point, like, we'd rather use that money before it passes through the grubby little tax man's hands. Like, before it gets there, like, let's use this. And Bob has really reshaped a lot of people's thinking. I think we should probably have an episode talking about this. Is the IRS is not your enemy. They're one of the best business partners you could possibly imagine, but you need to know how to use those tools. So join us on another episode when we talk about that. Aaron, how can they get in touch with you? What should someone do listening to this episode who wants to make a change in their world?
Yeah, if you're interested in having us take a look at your whole financial picture, reach out. I am including my calendar link underneath in the description. You can find us all on LinkedIn. We're posting nearly every day content like this. And I would also say, if you found value in this podcast or other episodes, share it with a doctor friend who you think would benefit as well.
And we always appreciate your time. We hope that this podcast is adding value to your life. If you want to join the conversation, if you've got questions, and you can let us know, you can stay anonymous. We don't have to talk, shout your name out or anything like that. But if you've got questions that you want answered from an anonymous perspective, send those to us, and then we can build content just for you. So join us there, join us on social media,